Today we will tell you about the kingpin who rose from a small-time marijuana grower to a cross-border cocaine trafficker, with the Hells Angels and the Montreal mafia always available on quick call. Yes, you guessed it. We're talking about Jimmy Cournoyer, famously known as the Pot Playboy. Before his arrest, the King of Pot was the largest supplier of marijuana to New York and the United States' East Coast. He was also known for his extravagant lifestyle, which included dating lingerie models and partying with prominent Hollywood actors. Watch the video till the end as we tell you about one of the biggest Playboy kingpins the world has ever seen. Early life and prison. Jimmy Cournoyer was born in the Canadian city of Laval in October 1979. Jimmy Cournoyer was a highly rated athlete. By the age of 10, he had earned a black belt in karate and was an avid hockey player. He was consistently named Athlete of the Year at school. However, his family's situation didn't let him chase his potential, as his father's construction business had fallen on hard times, and his mother's dry cleaning business was shut down. Jimmy's father, Richard Cournoyer, was unable to support his family's needs and abandoned the family home in 1996, leaving 3 letters for his wife and 2 sons. His written apologies were ineffective in preventing the family's emotional collapse. Jimmy's father's departure had a profound impact on him as a person. He dropped out of school at the age of 16 and began working a series of low-wage jobs. He also supported his brother by paying for his education and providing him with a rent-free apartment. He took up all of the responsibilities and stepped into the role of father figure that his family so desperately needed. After turning 18, he started running a hydroponic grow-op at his apartment, which he shared with his girlfriend and brother Joey. In August 1998, Cournoyer was arrested for the first time when Laval police discovered 11 marijuana plants and 4 packets of ready-to-sell marijuana in his flat. Mr. Cournoyer pleaded guilty and was sentenced to probation in the case in 1998. 2 years later, he was caught again selling marijuana out of his Jeep in the Kanesatake Mohawk Reservation, which was a half-hour drive from Laval. Given the fact that he pleaded guilty in that case as well, he avoided a lengthy prison sentence. Only a year later, he was detained for the 3rd time, when he was caught selling 10,000 ecstasy tablets to a customer for $65,000. The customer turned out to be an undercover agent. While in prison, Cournoyer developed relations with criminals that expanded into a multi-billion-dollar worldwide drug trafficking enterprise involving the Hells Angels, the Sinaloa cartel, Native American smugglers, and the Rizzuto and Bonanno crime families. Lessons learned. The lessons he took away from his prison time were not what the authorities had in mind. Cournoyer began to grow his network of contacts and establish layers of subordinates between himself and the narcotics. One of those subordinates was Mr. Racine, who was the brother of his lifelong girlfriend Amelia. Mario Racine, who was also a Canadian, was living in the United States in the early 2000s to supervise the increasingly large cargoes of marijuana streaming across the border. After coming back, Racine was put in charge of the company's East Coast distribution. The largest distributors typically supplied up to 200 pounds of marijuana at a time, with brand names such as Sour Diesel, which they resold in pound quantities to smaller retail dealers. Patrick Pais, the one-legged Quebecois, was another top member of Jimmy's company. He assisted Cournoyer in negotiating a contract with the Hells Angels to transport massive amounts of marijuana across the border, hidden beneath the tarps of tractors and trailers. Pais also assisted him in making contact with a network of Native American smugglers operating out of the St. Regis Mohawk Reservation, who transported their own cargo south on small boats during the summer and snowmobiles during the winter. The expanding network. The reserve, which lies on the border of New York State and Canada, provided an ideal route for delivering drugs to American customers. Pais's native employees had a long history of smuggling contraband such as weapons and cigarettes via the tangle of private docks. Their contact was named Kenneth Cree, who was one of the natives who took part in the operation and lived in a massive mansion surrounded by surveillance cameras. The trafficking ring was soon sending regular supplies of high-grade marijuana into the United States. In the mid-2000s, Cournoyer oversaw the transportation of man-sized bales of hydroponically produced weed across the border on motorboats and snowmobiles. Almost $1 billion of his money was laundered through the Sinaloa criminal cartel and brought back to Canada in pickup trucks with hidden traps in their radios and petrol tanks. Cournoyer was getting richer and richer. He drove a Porsche Cayenne and a $2 million limited edition Bugatti Veyron during the height of his fame. He started dating famous lingerie models and was friends with Georges St-Pierre, who was an MMA fighter. His social network was such that he once attended the same party as Leonardo DiCaprio while on vacation in Ibiza. Cournoyer got into an accident that resulted in the death of a person. As a result, Jimmy was imprisoned for 1 year. After serving for only a year, he was forced to live in a halfway home in Montreal after his release. While he was imprisoned, his business was shattered, as no one was able to properly take care of it. After returning, Cournoyer was able to rebuild it by meeting with associates discreetly during rushed encounters in the Montreal subway and while on work release from the halfway house, where he had secured a job driving an elderly woman to her medical appointments. The downfall. The DEA had no idea who Jimmy Cournoyer really was until 2007. His downfall began when his ex-girlfriend strolled into the Drug Enforcement Administration's Long Island District Office unannounced and told an agent everything she knew about Jimmy. The DEA doesn't usually settle marriage issues, but the woman was adamant that her one-time lover was a big player in the city's wholesale marijuana trade. As a result, the team of FBI agents began investigating the man. What began that day with the help of a single woman evolved over the next 7 years into an elaborate case that led to the discovery and eventual arrest of the King of Pot. Within a year of receiving the woman's complaint, DEA caught a massive lead when the Queens drug dealer who had been caught selling drugs was facing charges and turned himself into an informant to escape imprisonment. One piece of information he offered was the alias of his Canadian supplier, Cosmo, who he said got his name from his house in the Cité Cosmo, a luxurious condominium in Montreal's Laval neighborhood. The DEA started listening in on Cosmo's network using wiretaps and putting pressure on other dealers. The DEA eventually established that Cosmo's real name was Cournoyer. They were unaware of his previous history until they called the Laval authorities. The Canadians began to realize that Cournoyer was not some low-level drug dealer, but was a seasoned drug trafficker who was running one of the biggest marijuana trafficking businesses. Circle shrinking. At that time in New York, the Drug Task Force had also begun a sting operation against money launderers working with Mexican drug cartels. Racine, who was Cournoyer's New York manager and one of his closest collaborators, had been persuaded by an undercover agent serving as a cartel financier to send him $94,000 in marijuana revenues in the fall, promising to reinvest and cleanse the money through the purchase of cocaine. Racine was caught, but instead of detaining him at that time, they chose to let him go, albeit under monitoring, in order to keep the investigation going. Cournoyer already had connections to the Hells Angels, Mohawk smugglers, and Montreal's Rizzuto crime family, which controlled major swaths of the city's drug trade. Now that the task group had discovered that the organization also had a Mexican component, they set out to infiltrate that part of the operation. Cree, who was also a member of the Cournoyer group, was facing a lengthy jail sentence. To escape from that, the FBI convinced him to operate as an informant in 2010. The DEA then had Cree set up a money drop at a safe house just a few blocks from the federal courthouse in Brooklyn. Cree made a deal with Cournoyer to monitor the shipping of $200,000 from New York to Los Angeles for a 6% commission. Cournoyer gave him the phone number of a man in California who would take the money when he arrived as part of the contract. When Los Angeles undercover investigators dialed the number, they were connected to Alessandro Talloni. Now, Talloni was an Italian-born Rizzuto partner, who also functioned as Cournoyer's West Coast operations manager. He conducted a thriving money laundering operation out west, using filthy money to buy cocaine from the Sinaloa drug cartel, while also selling high-end hair care items on the side. The conviction. On February 16, 2012, the DEA received information that Jimmy Cournoyer would be going to Mexico. At 6 a.m., the flight to Mexico took off from Canada. As soon as he arrived at the airport, he was detained by Mexican officials. They refused to let him in, citing a red notice issued in his name by Interpol. Despite 3 attempts by Mexican officials to get Mr. Cournoyer aboard a plane to the United States, he resisted by threatening to hurt the captain and crew. He was finally hooded and escorted on board a plane to Houston. In the year following his arrest, Cournoyer and his lawyer, Gerald J. McMahon, contended in court that his deportation from Mexico was a result of a forced abduction and attempted to have the case against him dropped. However, as the evidence accumulated, Mr. Cournoyer pled guilty in federal court in Brooklyn in May 2013, just days before his trial was about to begin. Despite the fact that marijuana is becoming more widely legalized and, unlike methamphetamine or heroin, rarely generates exciting headlines, prosecutors said in a sentencing brief that Mr. Cournoyer's business was violent and resulted in the enrichment of other criminal gangs. As a result, the DEA was finally successful, after 7 years of switching witnesses, listening to wiretaps, and executing secret sting operations. Cournoyer was sentenced to 27 years in prison on drug conspiracy charges and is currently serving his sentence. That's it from today's video. We hope you enjoyed the content of the video, and if you did, show some love and hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you never miss out on any of the amazing videos we have in store for you.